Wanna play hide and clap?
I condemn you back to hell!
Hey guys, what's happening? Niyat here with Film Comics Explained. With The Conjuring Last Rites releasing in theaters this week, I thought it would be a good idea to explore all three Conjuring movies leading up to it, explaining and reviewing the films, while also shedding light on the true stories behind them, beginning with James Wan's 2013 supernatural horror The Conjuring, starring Vera Farmiga, Patrick Wilson, Lily Taylor, and Ron Livingston. Don't forget to hit subscribe and the notification icon to stay up to date on the latest content, and click the like button to help appease the algorithm gods. Also, if you'd like to make a suggestion on what you want me to cover next, please don't hesitate to let me know in the comments below.
I was on the set, and I didn't really have any corrections or changes. I don't remember even him ask. No,
I think that in a big part is due to the writers, the Hayes brothers, just really doing their homework and doing a lot of research. When they started writing the script, they were on the phone every day with Lorraine, and
They were.
Just picking her brains and and just basically trying to get to know who she is. And I think that is very important in bringing across the authenticity of the world that Lorraine lives in. And it's not a creature feature. It's not about that. It's a movie about atmosphere, vibe, mood, and stuff like that. And you create a lot of mood just from your photography, from your sound design, and your production design as well. And that, I think, blended seamlessly in telling the story.
James Wan has always struck me as one of Australia's most inventive genre filmmakers, not just because he can deliver scares, but because he understands every nut and bolt of how a movie works. From Saw, which he made with his friend Lee Winnell straight out of university, to Insidious, The Conjuring, Fast and Furious 7, and Aquaman, Wan has moved comfortably across a few genres. He's written and directed, yes, but he's also been deeply involved in producing, editing, and sound design on his projects. That broad hands-on experience shows up in the finished films. The scares aren't merely on the page or in the performance, they're baked into the cut, the soundscape, and the camera language.
I can still hear that voice.
After Insidious proved he could orchestrate supernatural terror with precision, Wan deliberately returned to the paranormal with a new goal: ground the horror in real-world casework. He reached out to Lorraine Warren, a renowned clairvoyant who'd spent decades investigating alleged hauntings alongside her husband Ed, a self-professed demonologist. Over many years, the Warrens compiled thousands of files, and a number of the stories orbiting their careers seeped into popular culture. The Amityville Horror, the Enfield Poltergeist, the Annabelle case, and crucially for Wan, the haunting of the Perron family.
How do you know it was something inhuman versus something like an earthbound
By the
spirit?
powers.
By the powers of
Remember
what
the
was
first
there.
time I went in that house, I went downstairs into the basement. I used religious provocation. I ordered in the name of Jesus Christ what was there. I commanded it to reveal its identity. Within seconds, I could feel what I can only describe as being under a waterfall, pressure, pushing me down to the floor. Then I could feel hundreds of pinpoints of electricity hitting my body. And then, as though they took a hot towel, wet towel, and dropped it right over my face, I couldn't breathe. That's the experience I had. And I went into what we call religious resistance. I then envisioned myself in a Christ light as a Christian, as a Catholic, and I again commanded it to leave in the name of Jesus Christ. It immediately lifted off. I knew right at that point what we were dealing with, and I said to myself, I don't think I'll ever come back in this house again, because I felt that a house isn't worth a person's life.
Whether one approaches those accounts with belief or skepticism, they offered something one could use: a spine of human testimony, ritual detail, and emotional stakes that would let him make a haunting feel lived in rather than abstract.
And it is frightening. I mean, remember, the inhuman is very, very difficult to deal with. And it's so cunning, you know. And but the human spirit, you can communicate, you can talk, you can help, but the inhuman.
Wow. And the doll, you still have the doll?
That you can't throw them away. You can't give them away. And before my husband's death, he would say to me many times, "What are we going to do with all of this?" And there's no answer.
Lorraine didn't just grant permission, she became a guide. Juan and Lorraine visited the farmhouse that had tormented the parents so he could absorb its layout, textures, and atmosphere. The trip wasn't a pleasant research jaunt. Everyone reportedly left feeling drained, as if the place itself leached warmth. That reaction clarified a production choice. Instead of wrestling with the logistics and the lingering unease of the actual location, they would build a meticulous set replica. On a set, one could control everything the audience feels: the thickness of the shadows, the creak in the stair, the distance between a character and a doorframe. Production design and cinematography become instruments of dread when you can tune them to the millimeter. Juan has admitted he spooks easily, and he channels that reflex into his filmmaking. You can feel it in the way he stages sequences. He gives you just enough visual information to let your brain run ahead of the frame, then withholds the payoff until you've tied yourself in knots. Sound is a co-conspirator. Murmurs, floorboards, a breath that isn't anyone's, layered with the kind of negative space only an editor who understands silence can hold. He doesn't chase jump scares so much as he choreographs the audience's attention, building a pattern and then snapping it at precisely the right moment. That craft would fall flat without performances to anchor it, and this is another place where one's process shows. Vera Farmiga didn't approach Lorraine as a generic medium. She worked directly with her to capture specific mannerisms and eccentricities, the cadence of a reassurance, the way a perception lands on her face before she speaks. Patrick Wilson and the rest of the ensemble did their homework too, building characters who feel sturdy enough to carry the film's belief system without tipping into camp. One then does something deceptively simple. He lingers. He holds on faces as characters absorb fear, doubt, and resolve. Those extra beats let us enter their emotional weather, so that when the film turns the screws, it hurts. All of this funnels into The Conjuring's core idea. A haunting is not just visitations and phenomena, it's a slow reshaping of the household's routines, affections, and courage. The Warrens provide the ritual logic and investigative frame, but the parents carry the cost. By using the case history, building a controlled yet lifelike environment, and placing disciplined performances at the center, one makes the supernatural feel uncomfortably plausible. That's why the film works. It's not one big trick, it's a sum of small, exacting choices, made by a director who understands story, frame, rhythm, and sound, and who knows how to guide great actors so the fear lands where it should, in us.
So excited to finally. I've been such a big fan of yours for so long. It's so great to finally.
Thank you. Oh,
yeah.
We were talking about you when we first came on board, and that's what we were super excited about because we'd all been such fans, you know. And then to finally get everyone together and be able to create your life up here and take the case and break it down. I think you're gonna like it.
The first Conjuring film opens in 1968 with a cautionary tale about permission and deception. Ed and Lorraine Warren meet Debbie and Camilla, two friends whose lives have been steadily unraveled by a doll named Annabelle. What began as small, eerie anomalies, Annabelle turning up in places no one left her, escalated after the women consulted a medium.
We are beyond terrified. We don't know what's going on or what to do. Can you help us?
They were told a 7-year-old girl named Annabelle had died in their apartment and wanted to stay with them. Out of sympathy, they granted that child permission to inhabit the doll. The consequence was not comfort, but chaos. Rooms trashed, red crayon messages on the walls asking if they missed her, and a growing sense that the doll was not a keepsake, but a keyhole. The Warrens explained the hard truth. They were not dealing with a child's ghost at all, but a demonic presence using the doll as a conduit. The doll is only a vessel. The real goal is far worse, possession of a person, and it was essentially invited in.
It was a big mistake acknowledging this doll. You gave it permission to infest your lives.
From there, the film shifts its focus to the parents, a family pushed by finances into a weathered farmhouse in Harrisville, Rhode Island. Roger and Caroline arrive with their 5 daughters, Andrea, Nancy, Christine, Cindy, and April, bringing with them the kind of optimism that comes with a fresh start. But the house immediately pushes back. Even the dog Sadie refuses to come inside and spends the night barking outside, a primal alarm the humans ignore.
What's the matter with you? Hey, come on, girl.
During a game of hide and clap, the girls uncover a door to a basement that's been boarded up and conveniently omitted from the paperwork. It's an apt metaphor for what the parents have purchased, not just a property, but a closed room in the house's history that is about to open.
Hard to tell, you know, it's an old piano and a whole bunch of garbage.
Come on up.
By morning, the house has started to leave marks. Caroline wakes with a dark bruise on her leg and takes inventory of smaller disturbances. Every clock has stopped at 3:07 a.m., a sour, death-like odor lingers in one bedroom, and an unnatural chill hangs in the air.
And there was this really funky smell in my bedroom last night. It reeked like something died.
Is it still there?
No.
Problem solved. I'm gonna make some coffee.
I'll be up in a minute. I'm gonna see if I can get this furnace working.
Yeah, that'd be nice. It's freezing.
Roger shrugs it off as moving damage, loose wiring, drafts, bad vents, but then they find Sadie dead outside. That's the moment the film quietly tips from oddness into threat. Doors swing open on their own, the clap of unseen hands echoes after midnight. These aren't isolated events, they form a pattern that suggests intelligence, attention, and a timetable that doesn't belong to the family. James Wan builds this unease with control. He doesn't flood the screen with shock, he leads us room to room, letting small details accumulate until ordinary spaces feel treacherous. Christine's leg is tugged in the dark and her sister is accused of pranking, while the foul smell returns and becomes a running point of denial.
Stop farting. It really stinks. Don't blame that on me. It's you.
One's camera lingers just a heartbeat too long in doorways and corners, teaching us to scan the frame, while the sound design, soft claps, breath where there should be none, turns negative space into a weapon. Cindy begins sleepwalking again, banging her head on a drawer, while April brings home an old toy she found under the crooked tree in the yard, a music box with a mirrored spinner. April also tells her mother about her new friend Rory, who appears behind you when the tune plays and the key turns.
When the music stops, you see him in the mirror standing behind you.
Caroline tries it, winds the toy, stares into the small mirror, and sees only her child reflected back. That's how the haunting behaves at first. It keeps just behind you, close enough to influence, far enough to deny. During a round of hide and clap with April, she's then lured by a beckoning presence into the closet.
Ha! You took your blindfold off. I win.
Later in the dead of night, a more openly malevolent force addresses the daughters directly. It whispers to Christine that it wants her family dead, then slams the door with a finality that turns superstition into immediacy. The haunting is no longer a series of pranks or atmospheric oddities. It has a voice, a demand, and an agenda.
Hey, wanna play hide and clap?
Taken together, these early movements lay out the film's underlying logic. The Annabelle prologue establishes the rules. Demons impersonate the innocent, permission matters, and objects are conduits, not endpoints. The parent house dramatizes those rules in a domestic key. Games, toys, and bedtime rituals are hijacked. The ordinary rhythms of a family's life become the staging ground for oppression. Away from the case files and lecture halls, the Warrens are a family first, and the film never lets us forget the cost of their vocation. Ed and Lorraine have a young daughter, and every investigation they accept drags the dangers of their work closer to their own home. Lorraine's clairvoyance is also both a talent and burden. After their last major case, she came back shaken, haunted by a vision so severe she refused to describe it even to Ed. The story establishes this domestic pressure not to romanticize their sacrifice, but to show the stakes of what they do. Every door they open in a stranger's house leaves one slightly ajar in their own. We see their method in miniature when they visit another couple convinced their home is haunted. There are bangs in the night, creaks in the walls, the quickening heartbeat of fear, but the Warrens walk the space, test the variables, and calmly dismantle the phantom. It's plumbing, settling timber, a draft, mundane causes misread as malevolence.
This place isn't haunted.
No, it rarely is. Yeah, there's usually always some kind of rational explanation.
This sequence matters because it grounds them as rational investigators first, spiritual warriors second. They're not chasing myths, they're eliminating them until only the inexplicable remains. In a lecture hall, they lay out what the inexplicable looks like when it's demonic. 3 escalating stages: infestation, oppression, possession. Infestation is the foothold, the haunted house phase of murmurs, footsteps, cold spots, and the sensation of being watched. Oppression is psychological warfare, a targeted campaign against the most vulnerable person in the household, wearing down judgment and hope. Possession is the end game, when will and personality are overrun. By the time the Warrens meet the parents, after being begged by Caroline to help, the pattern is distressingly clear. The family has moved beyond oddities into oppression. The phenomena are coordinated. The house is not merely noisy, it's adversarial.
Who's ever down there? I'm gonna lock you in now!
The initial walkthrough of the parent farmhouse is part interview, part reconnaissance. Ed and Lorraine speak to every family member, map hotspots of activity, and pay attention to details that keep repeating. Odors, temperature drops, the timing of events. Lorraine's clairvoyance adds another layer. During the assessment, she sees her presence 3 separate times, each time standing behind the parents as if claiming them. She senses other spirits lodged in the property, but one stands apart in its intensity, a purely hateful entity whose attachment, she warns, will not break if the family flees. It will follow them wherever they go.
Sometimes when you get haunted, it's like stepping on gum. You take it with you.
Given the severity, Ed advises that an exorcism may be required, but there is a process. They must document the case and seek authorization from the Catholic Church before any rite can be performed. The research begins to explain the pattern. The house, sold at a suspiciously low price, comes with a history no one wanted. Digging through records, the Warrens uncover the story of a former resident, Bathsheba, related, according to local law, to a woman executed in the Salem witch trials. The account is gruesome. Bathsheba's husband discovered her in the midst of a ritual sacrifice of their infant. She fled to the large tree on the property, proclaimed her devotion to Satan, cursed anyone who would dare take her land, and took her own life. The time of death was recorded as 3:07 a.m., the same time the parents' clocks freeze each night. The haunting has a schedule because the trauma that birthed it did. Armed with a working theory that Bathsheba's spirit is a malign force shadowing the family, the Warrens shift from analysis to evidence gathering. Helped by their associate Drew, they wire the house with thermal cameras and set up trigger alarms, a measured attempt to make the invisible measurable. This is not spectacle for its own sake, it's the documentation the church requires and the family deserves. Proof that what's happening is not imagined, not hysteria, but repeatable phenomena with a witness and a record.
What's this, do? You actually caught things on film?
Yeah, that's the point.
The first night yields little, enough to keep the nerves jangling, but not enough to satisfy a skeptical diocese. That quiet is its own tactic. After days of escalation, it feels like mercy, lulling both the parents and the investigators into breathing a little easier. In a house like this, calm is rarely a kindness, it's a coiled pause, and the Warrens know it. The pattern they've outlined, infestation, oppression, possession, doesn't end in a stalemate. The question is not whether the haunting will move again, but when and toward whom. By the next morning, the haunting stops hinting and starts talking. Caroline is no longer just exhausted and bruised, she's under Bathsheba's grip. Activity spikes that night. A sheriff brought in to keep watch glimpses a full-bodied apparition, moments before one of the parent girls vanishes into a hidden passage behind the wardrobe closet. The house is no longer a setting, it's an accomplice. April becomes the key to what lies inside. She tells Lorraine that Rory, the little boy identified as a former resident who died on the property, always hid in that passage when he was frightened. Lorraine squeezes into the crawl space and discovers a length of rope, the kind used in a hanging. It's a relic with intent, the rope Bathsheba used to take her own life. The floor then suddenly gives way, dropping Lorraine into the cellar, down into the house's memory. What she sees there is the pattern behind the chaos. In a flash of clairvoyant clarity, Lorraine witnesses the spirits of women Bathsheba has controlled over the years, mothers who lived on this land, overcome by a will not their own, driven to murder their own children.
She made me do it.
It is a ritualized perversion of motherhood, an act that, in the film's spiritual logic, exalts Bathsheba in hell's hierarchy. The message is simple and monstrous. She doesn't just torment families, she breaks them at their root and is rewarded for it. Lorraine shares this with the others, and the house answers with rage. In full view of everyone, Bathsheba seizes Nancy and hurls her across the room, as if to prove ownership. In response, the parents evacuate to a hotel, while the Warrens collect their footage and take it to Father Gordon, their contact inside the church. Gordon studies the tapes and photographs, doors moving on command, temperature spikes, the girl's terror, Lorraine's testimony, and is shaken into certainty. He promises to expedite the case to the Vatican for authorization, but pushback and the darkness pushes in. Almost immediately, the Warrens' own daughter is stalked by visions of the Annabelle doll, a retaliatory strike meant to warn them off. At the same time, Bathsheba reels Caroline back to the farmhouse. Under compulsion, Caroline takes two of her daughters from the hotel with a single dreadful purpose. After a call from Roger, Ed and Lorraine race to the property, arriving to pandemonium. Roger and the sheriff are wrestling Caroline as she tries to drive a pair of scissors into her child. Ed's first instinct is to call for a priest, but Lorraine snaps the awful reality into place. There isn't time. The church is miles away, and the entity's endgame is minutes away, and so Ed begins the exorcism himself.
Then you need to leave.
What are you talking about?
I have to do it. The exorcism.
While Roger, the officer, and Lorraine pin Caroline's thrashing body, Ed invokes the rite, forcing the demon to show its face. The house groans, lights strobe, objects fly. This is no longer a hunt for evidence. It's the fight to sever Bathsheba's hold before a mother's hands do the unforgivable. The exorcism reaches its cruel midpoint with a feint of relief. Caroline goes still, her body slackening as if the rite has taken hold. For a breath, everyone dares to believe it worked. Then the chair beneath her whips over and she's yanked upside down, suspended like a marionette. Ed commands the entity to release her, and after a long suffocating beat, Caroline crashes to the floor. Ed continues the incantation as Roger begs her to let his wife go, only to be told by Bathsheba that she's already gone, as the witch begins trying to kill everyone in the basement using telekinesis.
Ed, look out! She's already gone, and now you're all gonna die.
Upstairs, Drew has been combing the house for the missing April. He finds her tucked under the kitchen floorboards, exactly the kind of child-sized refuge Bathsheba's past victims sought. He shouts the discovery to the others, and that single, well-meaning call becomes a beacon, as the possessed Caroline then bolts, intent on finishing the deed.
She's under the house! Under the kitchen! No, Caroline, don't! No!
The house suddenly feels like a funnel. Ed, Lorraine, Roger, and the sheriff thunder after her through the narrow stairwell and into the cramped crawl spaces beneath the floor. The chase unfolds into the house's bones, beams, dust, the low splintered tunnels that connect rooms like veins. Caroline catches April and pins her, intent on completing the sacrifice. In that tight, airless moment, Lorraine drops to her knees and reaches through a gap in the boards to grab Caroline's head, forcing eye contact not with a demon, but with the woman still buried underneath. What follows is not Latin or holy water, it's memory. Lorraine reminds Caroline of who she is and what she stands to lose. Roger, the girls, the moments that define a life rather than stain it. She calls back to the conversation they shared earlier about family being the world and pushes that truth into the space Bathsheba occupies. The film's logic turns here. The counter-ritual to possession isn't only ecclesiastical authority, it's the reassertion of love and identity. Caroline's face then softens, her breathing slows, the hardness in her eyes drains away and she releases April. Dawn doesn't just arrive, it resolves. Caroline is helped across the threshold of the front door into the clean morning light. As she passes from the house into the yard, the bruises blotting her skin fade in real time, as if the attachment can't survive in the open with its claim broken. The family gathers in the grass, shaken, exhausted, yet intact, for a story obsessed with thresholds, basements, closets, crawl spaces. The simple act of crossing into daylight plays like a sacrament. The epilogue returns us to the Warrens' artifact room, their private museum of objects turned into conduits. Ed sets the parents' music box on an empty shelf. He and Lorraine leave, and for a moment the room is still. Then the box's tune begins to wind on its own before we cut to black. It's a closing that reads as both victory and warning. The family is saved not only by ritual, but by the refusal to surrender a mother's bond. Yet the objects, the doll, the box, the souvenirs of malice remain. Evil's footprint is not erased, it's catalogued, contained, and watched. The The Warrens' work in the film's worldview end on that uneasy note. Thresholds can be crossed in both directions. The best you can do is know where they are and hold the line.
The Conjuring films are based on case files that Ed and Lorraine Warren investigated. Really kind of grounds these films. It really gives them a sense of realism. It gave us a foundation that was real to begin with.
So all these are taken from cases you've investigated?
That's right.
He'll say to me, Lorraine, I'm going to go out in the museum and bless the doll. And I'll say, now, Father, remember, don't do it by saying her name.
Wow.
Don't do it. And but I don't want to give any recognition. Even looking at that picture there, it gives you recognition.
As for the true story the film is based on, Roger and Caroline Perrin did indeed move their 5 daughters into an 18th century farmhouse in Harrisville, Rhode Island in 1971. Over the next several years, they reported a run of disturbances: knocks, foul smells, temperature drops, objects shifting on their own, and a handful of episodes that frightened the family enough to seek outside help. Their time in the house stretched through the 1970s, and much of what the public knows today comes from interviews with the Perrin children as adults and Andrea Perrin's memoir.
You could see them. You could smell them. The house was just full of people that lived there that were not us.
There was the entrance to the cellar from the front hallway at the bottom of the stairs.
That's the one where we all felt a sense of dread.
I think I went through one time in 10 years that I lived there, and that was the one time enough to know that you don't go there.
Ed and Lorraine Warren visited in the early 1970s, and, according to contemporary retellings, conducted a seance in 1973 that spiraled into a frightening incident centered on Caroline. Roger Perrin then asked the Warrens to leave, and there's no public record of a church-authorized exorcism in the case. These details, Warren involvement, seance, no formal exorcism, are consistent across mainstream features that have revisited the file since the film's release.
The Conjuring is very, very accurate. When you give recognition, when you go into a place where haunting phenomena is going on, and you give it recognition, you give it energy, and then it can do whatever it wants. Sometimes, for me, I'll make the sign of the cross, name of Jesus Christ, go away, and go back to where you came from when I get really overpowered.
The movie's antagonist, Bathsheba, draws on a real local woman, Bathsheba Sherman, who lived from 1812 to 1885, and whose grave is in Harrisville. Folklore later cast her as a child-killing witch who hanged herself, but historians and local reporters note there's no evidence for those claims. Records show that she died in 1885 of illness. In short, Bathsheba was real, the witch mythology remains unproven. The enduring narrative, then, is a blend. A Rhode Island family's decade of unsettling experiences, a brief, controversial intervention by the Warrens, a local legend woven in after the fact, and a film that heightens all of it into a clean, cinematic haunting.
Feelings, brushings, you could walk down there and you'd be constantly certain that there was something behind you. Even if you couldn't hear it, you could feel it.
The activity in the house was a tremendous distraction to us. It's something, even in retrospect, none of us have been able to free ourselves from.
Here's why I think The Conjuring isn't just a great modern haunted house film, but the crown jewel of the franchise. It marries airtight craft with a sincere human core. James Wan doesn't rely on shock alone, he builds a whole grammar of fear. Image, sound, rhythm, performance, and theme. So the film works as a meticulously engineered machine and as a story about a family trying to hold together under pressure. Wan's camera maps the house with patient, readable shots. You understand the floor plan, which means you feel it tighten as the story escalates. It's classic haunted house storytelling, but shot with the confidence of someone who knows where your eyes will go and how long you'll hold your breath before you even realize you're doing it. What separates The Conjuring from 100 imitators is how carefully it modulates tension. One stacks small, tangible disruptions, stopped clocks, bruises, the stink of rot, a tug at a sleeping leg, before letting the film bloom into overt manifestations. He favors long gliding moves and composed wides that dare you to scan the background, then punctuates them with precisely timed visual shocks. It feels inevitable, not cheap.
When I first met Lorraine, I was actually very nervous. I want to do her justice and basically have her blessing on the film.
I love this.
I've got Lorraine's blessing now.
What was fascinating about this from the beginning, and I remember James selling it to us, was as dark as you get with these stories, there was going to be a real freedom in wanting to show the light and the love.
And that purity is just a stark contrast to that negativity and the darkness that we portray. And that's what's so appealing.
The writing is also character-driven. By giving the Warrens a domestic life, a daughter, and marriage under strain from Lorraine's clairvoyant burden, the film avoids turning them into folkloric exorcists. They're professionals who start by debunking. They rule out plumbing and drafty floorboards before they invoke the demonic. The lecture scene that plays out the progression from infestation to oppression to possession is expository, yes, but it's also scaffolding. Once those terms are in play, the audience can track the escalation without the script having to pause and explain. The parent side of the story is equally grounded. Financial stress, sibling dynamics, a family dog who refuses to enter the house, ordinary details that give the haunting something to corrupt.
What I really love about their characters is, even though they approach it from two very different perspectives, they both have a very similar end goal.
The crucial aspect for me was the real-life inspiration of Ed and Lorraine Warren.
The performances sell everything. Vera Farmiga plays Lorraine Warren with a poised gentleness that makes her second sight feel like a wound as much as a gift. You can read the cost of every vision in her face.
Lorraine Warren is such a fascinating character, and Ed has passed on now. But with Vera, she actually was fortunate enough to have Lorraine be around to be able to talk to her, to understand who she is, and kind of really know what motivates her to do what she does.
Hi, Mama Bear.
Patrick Wilson's Ed radiates steadiness. Capable, pragmatic, protective, so that when he steps into the right later in the film, it feels like an extension of character rather than a genre obligation.
Patrick's version of Ed is a very romanticized version of Ed. Ed was always much more a very practical guy. Being a demonologist is just like being a carpenter. Exorcising a demon or a ghost out of a house is no different to fixing a car or a TV set. And Vera Farmiga, her character is psychic, and so she comes at it from a different angle.
On the parent side, Lily Taylor is outstanding. She charts Caroline Slide from worn-down mother to tormented vessel with specificity and restraint, then commits to the ferocity possession demands without losing the person underneath. Ron Livingston gives Roger a quiet warmth. He's the pragmatic dad who wants a simple fix, new house, new start, and can't quite accept that the problem isn't in the wiring. The daughters also feel like real kids, not props. Their back and forth teasing, the way fear travels through them differently, makes the threat land in the gut.
When you're investing in a character, do you take that home or can you leave it behind? Because I feel like a movie like this would have to cling to you in weird ways.
Yeah, it does. And I think you just, do some of the things that you need to do, like a psychic hygiene or something like that.
I like that word.
Just clean up a little bit, like you would wash makeup off.
What's your psychic hygiene?
They have these nest cams, and you can see birds in their nests, and there were these little birds that had just hatched. I would come home at like 11 p.m. and I would just watch those little birds till like 3 in the morning, and I just felt like, okay, I'm all right now.
Production design and cinematography give the film its texture. The farmhouse is a character. Weathered wood, narrowed hallways, a yawning cellar that seems to inhale light. The 1970s period details, fabrics, wallpaper, hair, cars aren't loud. They simply situate the story in an analog world where there's no smartphone flashlight to break the mood. The color palette leans warm and lived in by day, then drowns towards grays and browns at night, so you feel daylight as relief rather than neutrality. Practical effects do a lot of the heavy lifting. Slamming doors, sheet-covered shapes, carefully rigged pulls that send bodies or furniture flying. Because so much is physical, you trust what you're seeing. Sound is the other half of the film's nervous system. The mix weaponizes small noises, the clap of hands in the next room, a breath that isn't anyone's, the scrape of a music box. Silence becomes a tool, long beds of near quiet that stretch your nerves taut before the score or a sting snaps them. Joseph Bishara's music is used thoughtfully, with jagged textures and dissonant swells that feel like the house itself is singing. There's discipline here. Jump scares happen, but they're owned by shot construction and sound design rather than by a loud chord pasted onto nothing. When the story finally reveals the house's history, Bathsheba's curse, the pattern of mothers driven to kill, the film lands on a theme that gives its third act weight. Evil in The Conjuring isn't just noise and movement, it's a ritualized perversion of the family. The demon doesn't smash plates because it's bored, it erodes bonds until it can turn a mother against a child. That's why the climax is so satisfying. Yes, the rite matters, holy words, defiance, the naming of the thing. But so does Lorraine's intervention, which isn't theological so much as personal. She compels Caroline to remember who she is, what her family means, and what she would lose if she surrenders. In a genre that often treats characters as pieces on a chessboard for effects, this moment of identity reclaimed is powerful and, crucially, consistent with everything the film has built.
Well, when I made the first Conjuring, I just really wanted that film to stand on its own, to be the best it can be, and really, just wanted to make a film that was very much a throwback to the kind of horror films that I loved growing up. The sort of more classic sort of haunted house stories from the 70s and 80s.
If you're looking for reasons this is the best in the series, they're everywhere. It's the purest expression of one's haunted house sensibility before the mythology sprawls. It balances scares and sincerity without tipping into camp. It gives both sets of protagonists, investigators and victims, agency and interiority, and it's built with a level of formal care that makes repeat viewings rewarding. Later entries deliver strong sequences and bigger canvases, but the first film has the cleanest line between setup and payoff, the most disciplined craft, and the sharpest emotional center.
I run a happy set. I run a light set. It should not be dark like the subject matters I have to deal with, because if it's dark in the real world, I'm not interested, because I'm terrified of that kind of stuff.
Dark in the real.
Terrified and terrifying.
Okay, now speaking of real world, tell us what happened to you after interviewing Lorraine.
Well, in the film, there's a scene where there's an interview and the recording comes out funny. It's sort of wah, wah, wah. Going in to speak with Lorraine, I was terrified about what it would mean, what sort of spirits might be in the room with us. I go in, I do the interview, she's a delightful woman. I bring the tapes back here to NBC, and I get an email a few days later from one of our media managers, Patrick, that tells me, everything was fine with your tapes except for one tape, Lorraine's, where the audio is wah, 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 because there's demons in them tapes. I threw them in the garbage, I wouldn't bring them home. I'm terrified of what it might mean.
The Conjuring 2 returns to James Wan's haunted house format, but shifts the canvas from American suburbia to a North London council house, where the Enfield poltergeist case collides with the Warrens' private fears and public skepticism. It's a sequel that widens the myth, introducing the non-adversary named Valak and the Crooked Man as weaponized nursery rhyme, without abandoning the series' human core. A family living paycheck to paycheck, a marriage steadied by faith and habit, investigators navigating cameras and cynics as much as cold spots and voices. Opens with a prologue that is more than a headline reenactment. It's a psychological trapdoor. In Amityville, Ed and Lorraine Warren sit with the Lutz family to test the truth of their haunting claims. A seance becomes the film's first major device. Lorraine's sight drags her into a restaging of the DeFeo murders, but crucially from the killer's vantage point. We are made to watch her pull the trigger as if her body's the weapon. It's an elegant way to show both the reach and the cost of her gift. Second sight here isn't a parlor trick, it's forced complicity. As the vision fractures, a new figure intrudes, a pale demonic nun, followed by the image of a man dying implied as being Ed. Lorraine's scream snaps the spell and Ed pulls her back. Two things are planted, a specific antagonist and a prophecy of loss. The Warrens exit Amityville not with closure, but with dread, the kind that follows you home.
This is as close to hell as I ever want to get.
3 years later, the film shifts to Enfield, England, from American myth to British working-class reality. The Hodgsons live in a cramped council house. Peggy, a worn-down single mother, Margaret, the eldest daughter, shouldering adult calm, Janet, bright and restless, Johnny, and Billy, boys navigating schoolyard cruelty. Billy especially marked by a stammer that makes him a target. Money is thin, tempers even thinner. Their father is left for a woman down the road. One sketches all this with economical detail, so the haunting is something real to invade.
No, he hasn't paid a penny of child maintenance for 3 months.
No, Billy, I didn't get any bloody biscuits because we don't have any bloody money!
The first nights are a study in escalation by inches. Janet and Margaret share a room when a presence begins to press at the edges of Janet's awareness. At first it plays like adolescent trickery, voices in the dark, Janet seemingly answering herself, until a rasping elderly male voice growls.
This is my house.
Margaret assumes it's a prank, right up until the voice repeats behind her ear. She flicks on the light, no one is there. She then opts to sleep with the light on, a small human choice that signals we've crossed from spooky to threatening. Back in the States, the Warrens do the dutiful public thing, a TV appearance to talk through Amityville. It's not for spectacle, but to show the climate they work in. Skeptics ready with the word hoax, accusations that Lorraine's visions are theater.
Try and show a little class.
I'm not going to show class as somebody who's sitting here telling lies about my wife and me.
Be careful.
Ed bristles and the exchange turns heated before Lorraine reins him in backstage. These scenes are important because they anchor the Warrens as methodical, not credulous. They also underline the film's theme of pressure from two fronts, the demonic inside the house, the derision outside of it. On the other side of the world, heavy pounding rattles Margaret's door. She opens it to an empty landing just as Janet returns, denying any part in the racket. One uses these beats to establish a pattern, small concrete descalations of the ordinary, furniture that moves, toys that won't stay put, sounds with no bodies, each one a breadcrumb leading towards something with intent. Enfield's domestic rhythms give the supernatural a way in. The children play with a turntable that sings the nursery rhyme, "There Was a Crooked Man," and the film quietly turns that tune into a motif, an eerie metronome for what's about to warp their home. Billy, making nighttime rounds to the bathroom, notices a toy fire truck in the hallway. He rolls it into a small fabric tent and shuffles away, only to find the truck roll back towards him. He tries it again. This time, a deep, booming groan answers from inside the tent, causing Billy to bolt into his mother's room. Janet, unnerved by episodes she can't account for, ties her wrist to the bedpost before sleeping the following day, a child's attempt at control, but she later wakes on the living room floor, puzzled and untethered, with no memory of leaving her room. What's effective about this stretch is how completely the film binds its scares to character and circumstance. The Hodgson's house is not a gothic mansion, but a narrow lived-in space with thin walls and thinner privacy. Lights stay on because electricity is cheaper than peace of mind. A mother smokes to the filter because she can't afford another pack. Into that reality, the haunting inserts itself, not as spectacle but as pressure. A voice staking ownership, a toy that refuses to obey the rules of cause and effect. A girl who secures herself only to wake where she didn't choose to be. The fear builds because it's happening to people we recognize.
I'll tell my mom if you don't stop.
I'll break her neck.
No.
By this point, one has laid the rails for the rest of the film. The Amityville vision gives the Warrens a nemesis and a ticking fear. The Hodgson's household gives the story a heartbeat. Kids with specific vulnerabilities, a mother exhausted by everything that isn't supernatural, and a home whose geography we understand. Stairs, small bedrooms, and a hallway that turns into a corridor of dread. The Crooked Man tune and the guttural "This Is My House" do double duty as motifs and warnings. In short, this opening act defines stakes. The Warrens must work under public skepticism and private terror. The Hodgsons must survive nights that feel longer than they should. The collision when investigators and victims finally meet will matter because the groundwork has been done. The case is not a headline, it's a family, a house and a pressure that won't let either breathe. The haunting in Enfield escalates from unnerving to undeniable, with a series of incidents that are simple on the surface and terrifying in their implication. Sitting alone with a television after taking the day off from school due to a fever, Janet watches the channels flick over by themselves. The remote has also vanished, one of those petty, maddening losses that feels domestic rather than supernatural, until she turns and finds it on the chair behind her, placed as if by a prankster who wants credit. Then the prankster steps out of the corner. A gaunt figure emerges and claims the space with a guttural.
My house!
That night, the pressure turns physical. Janet wakes on her bedroom floor as if thrown, telling Margaret that someone else is inside the house. Before disbelief can settle in, both girls' beds begin to shudder. The room itself seems to reject them.
What you talking about?
They sprint to Peggy's room, and when she moves to scold them for playing around, a heavy dresser slams against the door in front of her. The Hodgsons do what frightened people should do in this circumstance. They run toward the nearest ordinary life. They flee across the street to their neighbors, the Nottinghams, and call the police to make the nightmare official. The officers walk the rooms, find no intruder, and are seconds away from wrapping it up when a chair skates across the floor under its own power.
Well, there's nothing we can do about that.
The law has watched the law of physics break, and their composure cracks. The film smartly uses this beat to give the family a crucial gift: witnesses who aren't related to them and who aren't inclined to believe. Across the ocean, terror crosses the Warrens' threshold as well. Ed is painted an image from a dream, a pale nun with a dead-eyed stare, and Lorraine recognizes it instantly as the presence that invaded her Amityville vision.
Couldn't get out of my head, so maybe this might help.
In a well-staged sequence, their daughter draws Lorraine into the hall and they stare at the nun-shaped silhouette. Lorraine follows the figure into the office and finds only the painting, and then the painting stops being just paint. The room's darkness gathers into a body. The nun strides forward and seems to animate its own portrait, snarling as it charges. In that impact, Lorraine is thrown back into the same prophetic vision. A man she loves dying, Ed apologizing, a wooden spike punching through him. She tears at her Bible, scrawling frantically, before Judy's voice pulls her out. What began as a distinct case is now personal. The demon is willing to fight on their ground. We also see the name Valak in their bookshelf and on the necklace their daughter was making, indicating who is behind this. As word spreads through Enfield, the haunting becomes a spectacle and a battleground for belief. Investigators arrive with different agendas. Maurice Gross, Ernest Stanopin, and Anita Gregory, coolly skeptical, looking for trickery. With a news crew and microphones in place, Janet sits for an interview and buckles under scrutiny. Her posture tightens, her eyes focus past the room, and a voice like gravel grinds out of her throat. A 72-year-old who calls himself Bill Wilkins and demands that everyone get out of his house.
They're calling it England's Amityville.
Whether one reads this as ventriloquism, disassociation, or genuine possession, the effect is chilling because it is so specific. A name, an age, and a claim of ownership. The Nottingham's living room becomes a makeshift dormitory for the children, a place that feels safe because it's familiar, but safety doesn't last. Billy wakes to the sound of a bell and roams the dark, where the nursery rhyme they've been playing mutates from the Nottingham dog Baron into a crooked man monster. The rhyme's lanky silhouette comes to life, lurching and chanting in a voice that turns sing-song into threat, and chases him through the house. He runs to wake the adults, but the fear follows. Janet steps forward, mouth shaping the same crooked cadence in that old man's voice, and lets out a shriek that shatters the room's lights. What had read as poltergeist mischief now looks like full-blown possession. The case has crossed 3 thresholds. The police have seen what they can't explain. The media has amplified what the family can't control, and the demon has made its endgame clear by stepping inside Janet. The result is a tight vice of pressure, social, domestic, spiritual, that primes the story for the Warrens' intervention. What began as a house with strange noises has become a battleground with rules, symbols, and a claimant who keeps repeating the same sentence because it is, in truth, the whole argument. Whose house is this?
If it is a hoax, you just turn around and leave.
A priest soon arrives at the Warrens' home with something they can't ignore, an audio recording from Enfield of Bill speaking through Janet. He asks the Warrens to be the church's eyes and determine if it is a hoax, but tells them they don't need to interfere beyond that. Lorraine hesitates, telling Ed about the vision she's been carrying since Amityville, his death sudden and brutal. Ed hears it differently, as a warning meant to be heeded, not a fate to surrender to, and they ultimately agree to go to England.
And if God is showing you my death, then he's doing it for a reason.
In Enfield, the Hodgsons don't need to make a case. Their house shows it. Peggy leads Ed into the girl's bedroom, now a wreck. Dozens of crosses cover the walls, a desperate hedge against a presence that has learned to work in the dark. The room is also chained, like a dangerous animal.
I hung them up, hoping they'd keep things from moving around.
Has it worked?
No.
Outside, Lorraine finds Janet on the swings. The girl is exhausted, not just from the nights, but from being treated like a pariah at school and on the street. Lorraine answers with kindness, explaining one person can make a difference. She says Ed did that for her. It's here that Janet confesses that the voice inside the house has a message specifically for Lorraine. It wants to hurt her.
When did it say that?
Right now.
That night, the living room becomes a cautious laboratory. The Warrens, Maurice Gross and Peggy, set up to provoke communication. Janet sits in the chair where the haunting started, and the voice arrives, announcing itself as Bill Wilkins. What's interesting is how Janet slowly morphs into a silhouette of Bill in the background as Ed tests the voice, with faith and proximity, holding up his crucifix before Bill snarls and then collapses into garble.
Let go!
In the after-action huddle, doubt creeps in. Lorraine tells her that she doesn't sense anything, while Anita Gregory, the most skeptical investigator on scene, argues that the evidence is thin and the girl could be role-playing. Ed doesn't fully disagree. He's seen hoaxes before and he hates the idea of being used.
But all I can sense is their own fear.
The house answers by escalating. The Warrens stay overnight and Janet, drawn as if by a magnet, is suspended upside down before being pulled into the bedroom upstairs through the walls. One by one, the crosses turn upside down, an unmistakable mockery, before Bill's ghost runs at her.
Janet!
Her screams send everyone scrambling for the chained door, and they wrench it open before dragging Janet back into the hall. It's also here that Peggy finally sees Bill for the first time. Between these assaults, the film remembers to be human. The children gravitate toward the Warrens, who, by staying, begin to feel like borrowed parents.
God will be there for all who need.
Peggy mentions that her ex-husband took the family's records when he left, and they haven't had any music in the house since. Ed returns with an Elvis LP, and when the player sputters, he doesn't miss a beat. He picks up a guitar and sings Can't Help Falling in Love. For 3 minutes, the room belongs to the kids again. Ed also uses the moment to preach a different gospel. Don't let bullies tell you who you are. It's not just prep talk, it reframes the haunting as a bully to be resisted, not a demon to be appeased.
Come on, how bad can it be? Bloody hell.
Lorraine, meanwhile, carries the weight of foreknowledge. In a quiet conversation, Maurice tells her they're on the cusp of history.
This isn't a laboratory, this is someone's house.
He admits his own reason for chasing ghosts, a daughter he lost, and a hope, perhaps a delusion, that the veil might lift for him long enough to say what was left unsaid. The case is no longer a headline, it's a magnet for grief. Unfortunately, they discover that even the plumbing is weaponized. Peggy brings Ed to the flooded basement to check a persistent leak. In the gloss of black water behind him, she glimpses a figure. It isn't a trick of light. The old man's reflection lunges and seizes her from the waterline before biting into her arm. Ed hauls her back and they find Bill's dentures in the water matching the bite mark as the house keeps finding new ways to make the ordinary treacherous. The house then stages a full demonstration on Christmas Eve. The children hear clatter in the kitchen. Johnny, newly emboldened by Ed's talk of bullies, decides to confront the noise. Then Margaret screams as Janet vanishes from beside her and teleports into the kitchen holding a knife, ready to pounce on her brother. Downstairs, the kitchen door locks itself. Through the frosted glass, bodies and cutlery whip through the air. When the adults force entry, the room is wrecked, chairs overturned, plates shattered. They find Johnny shaken but alive. Janet, impossibly, has been wedged into the narrow cavity of an electrical box, eyes fixed past the living, muttering a garbled phrase as if taking dictation from somewhere else.
Won't me!
Doubt doesn't end the Enfield case, it sharpens it. Anita Gregory cues up footage that appears to show Janet tossing objects in the kitchen, to a room of tired adults that looks damning, the kind of staged chaos that feeds tabloids. Humiliated and furious by their claims that Janet was making it up, Peggy orders everyone to leave, and even the children, desperate for a normal life, start to turn on Janet. Cornered, she admits the awful bargain. It made her do it. If she didn't perform on command, it would hurt her family.
It said it would kill you.
On the train to their hotel, the Warrens sit with the unease that the camera only ever caught tricks. Lorraine can't shake the feeling that the fakery shows up precisely when a lens is pointed at Janet, as if the spectacle itself is being managed. Ed then replays the audio tapes they recorded during Bill's interviews. On a hunch, he lines them up, overlapping the fragments. Together, the syllables resolve into a plea.
Won't let me go!
In that moment, the case reframes itself. Lorraine then stumbles into another vision and meets the real Bill, old, tired, no longer menacing, speaking in a riddle that points beyond himself. Then the nun demon from Amityville appears behind him and drags him away. Bill isn't the author of this haunting, he's a trapped mouthpiece. The nun-shaped entity is the one writing the script.
The old man's spirit is just a pawn.
And so the Warrens turn back to Enfield to find the Hodgsons locked outside, pounding on their own door as the storm tears at the street and a possessed Janet wreaks havoc inside.
Leave us alone!
Lorraine needs one more piece, the demon's name. Power over it depends on that. She rifles through the Bible she'd frantically scribbled in during her earlier trance and discovers what her hand had been trying to tell her for days. Inwardly, on bracelets, on kitchen notes, in the bookshelf, she's been writing the same letters, V-A-L-A-K.
Valak.
This triggers a lightning strike which shears the old tree in the front garden into a jagged spear, and Lorraine freezes. It's the same image she saw buried in her vision of Ed's death. At the same time, Ed forces his way in through the back, but a pipe bursts in the basement, blasting steam and half blinding him. Stumbling through the house's bowels, he's ambushed by the Crooked Man, now plainly a puppet for the same demonic will. Ed fights clear and finds Janet at an upstairs window. The glass explodes outward, revealing a clean leap onto the sharpened trunk below. Luckily, he lunges and catches her. The two of them pitched out over the drop, his grip anchored only by heavy curtains that begin to tear stitch by stitch. When Lorraine reaches the room, Valak steps between her, all teeth in contempt. The film has been building to this, not a Latin word as a magic key, but a name as an act of truth. Lorraine speaks it, Valak, and with the authority of recognition, condemns it back to hell, enabling Ed to haul Janet back to safety. Morning brings the kind of calm that feels earned. Peggy and Janet thank the Warrens with the relief of people who finally slept. A title card notes what the case became, one of the most notorious hauntings on record. Life didn't turn mythic afterwards. Peggy stayed in that house for 40 years and, in a detail that lingers, died in the same chair Bill Wilkins once occupied. Back in Connecticut, the Warrens do what they always do at the end of a war, catalog the wreckage so others won't have to live it. Ed places the Crooked Man's toy in their artifact room a few feet from the Annabelle case. He then hears music upstairs. Lorraine's set Can't Help Falling in Love spinning, a callback to the night he gave the Hodgson kids a little piece. They're danced in their quiet kitchen, a small human epilogue that sums up the film's heart. Evil can claim a house for a while. Love decides what a home feels like.
The reason we picked this particular case is because this is one of the most interesting ones. The haunting of the Hodgson family is a mirror reflection of the Amityville story in that both cases are very well documented, and out of their repertoire of cases that they've investigated of their lifetime, this is one of their most interesting ones.
The Enfield poltergeist case was a headline-grabbing disturbance that unfolded at 284 Green Street in Enfield, North London, from August 1977 to 1979. Single mother Peggy Hodgson reported furniture moving, loud knockings, sudden cold spots, and most memorably, incidents centered on her 11-year-old daughter Janet. The family fled to neighbors for help, police were called, and one officer even signed a statement saying that he saw a chair slide several feet on its own. Press attention followed, and the story dominated British tabloids and TV for roughly 18 months. The Society for Psychical Research dispatched investigator Maurice Gross, later joined by author-researcher Guy Lyon Playfair. They recorded hundreds of hours of audio and documented objects thrown, furniture moved, and episodes where Janet appeared to levitate a short distance. A deep, gruff voice soon emerged through Janet that identified itself as Bill Wilkins, a former resident. Years later, Wilkins' son confirmed his father had died in the house in the manner the voice described.
How many voices are there?
600.
600 the voices.
I know the joke.
How many really are there, Margaret?
I think so far we've had 10
Three.
Sensible voices, but the rest of the names are absolute rubbish.
Whatever one's conclusion, this mix of taped voices, photographs, and multiple adult witnesses is why Enfield remains one of Britain's most cited modern hauntings. Skepticism formed part of the record from the start. Other SPR members, notably Anita Gregory and John Beloff, suspected trickery and noted episodes that looked staged for reporters. The skeptical investigator Joe Nichol later argued the case could be explained by mischief and misinterpretation.
Mr. Gross, a lot of people, hearing these voices produced by the children, will simply say that they are very good ventriloquists, and that this is all a hoax.
The
They're certainly not very good ventriloquists. We have had tests on them to see whether they can ventriloquize. They can't. To keep up this particular type of voice for any length of time without damage to the vocal cords is absolutely impossible. But don't forget, these children don't do this for a couple of minutes or so. They do it for lengths of periods up to 3 hours, and without any hoarseness or sore throats whatsoever.
Even Janet acknowledged that a small fraction of incidents were faked once or twice, while insisting the overwhelming majority were not. The upshot is a case file that has always lived between believers and debunkers, and still does.
I never charged for anything I did, so we had to make our money with our paintings. What happened wasn't good. I needed to help them.
Lorraine has cited this particular case as being one of the most terrifying of her career, the epicenter of one of the most witnessed and the longest case of poltergeist activity.
Oh my God, the levitation of those girls. They had a bed on this side and that side. Then they'd levitate, crisscross in the air.
The true life aspect of it, the fact that Ed and Lorraine truly did this for so many years goes a long way, because one wonders what you would do in the circumstances.
Ed and Lorraine did visit the house, but most accounts agree their role was brief compared with Gross and Playfair's months-long involvement, far less than the film suggests. That disparity between the cinematic narrative and the historical record is why summaries of the real case usually emphasize the SBR team, the press, and the local witnesses over the Warrens. In short, the true story behind The Conjuring 2 is an 18-month Enfield drama of knocks, moving furniture, a child's unsettling voice, competing investigators, and a family caught between notoriety and fear, documented widely, disputed fiercely, and still argued over nearly 5 decades later.
The first Conjuring was a lot more cut and dry, meaning, it's like, oh, we see a ghost, that's exactly what it is. In this one, I'm playing more with the sense of whether or not this is a hoax or if it's not a hoax, and kind of like having a bit of that uncertainty just makes it feel like a different movie to the first one.
The Conjuring 2 expands the canvas without losing the pulse that made the first film work. It's bigger, new country, deeper lore, a second monster on the board, yet it still feels intimate because one keeps centering people. For me, it isn't quite as taut or tactile as the original, but it's a well-crafted haunting, generous with character, well-constructed and sincere about what's at stake. One's direction remains the franchise's chief pleasure. He maps the Hodgsons' narrow home in clear, patient shots so you always understand where everyone is, which turns the house into a pressure cooker rather than a maze.
There's a lot of really long kind of sequences where he'll join 3 scenes and put it in one run. So you're just in the moment of like, I hear my daughter screaming, what is that? Coming, turn the lights on, running down the hall, hearing it, then going into the next scene, what that is. So you do get this kind of long, continuous feeling of like being in the reality of that situation.
Everyday spaces become threats through blocking and rhythm. A hallway that seemed harmless at breakfast becomes a gauntlet by night. A child's tent breathes like a lung. The flooded basement turns into a black mirror. Set pieces are staged with clarity, the crosses slowly inverting, the nun painting that animates and steps forward, the window ledge finale with curtains tearing. If the film occasionally leans on digital flourish, The Crooked Man is an eerie idea that sometimes looks a shade too synthetic. It mostly grounds the uncanny in physical space and real reactions.
I think one of the biggest things that attracted me to this particular story and wanting this to be the second movie is the setting. I really do think the London setting just gives it a slightly different flavor. The location setting, the people just have a different look to it, have a different smell to it. My cinematographer, Don Burgess, did such a great job in capturing that atmosphere that I really wanted to go for.
When you get Don, it's a different look, and he's really, really unbelievable, and obviously in tune with each director. To be able to shift his focus and his look is pretty astounding.
Well, this film for me has been an absolute joy because we have a very visual director, James Wan, who's recreating this story. And so the cinematography is a big part of telling this type of a story with the light and the shadow, what you see and what you don't see. When I light a set, I'm always keeping that in mind. I want it to be dramatic, I want it to be interesting, but I want it to feel real. I want the audience to be connected to it.
Production and period texture pull their weight without showboating. 1970s Enfield feels lived in. Damp, cold, peeling wallpaper, mismatched furniture, a boiler that never quite behaves, uniforms hung to dry by a heater that can't keep up. The house's modest scale is key. It's not a gothic mansion with secret ballrooms. It's a tight stack of rooms where privacy is thin and fear has nowhere to go. Sound design and score do half the scaring. Joseph Bishara's music coils around the edges, scrapes, choruses, low brass, used sparingly so silence can sharpen the frame.
I've always said that you can make a scary movie where the visual isn't necessarily the best. You may not have the most money to pull off something, right? But if you have a score that basically hits you in the gut, that really reaches down, that's what makes it terrifying. And we've proven time and time again, you know, like you have Paranormal Activity, you have the Blair Witch Project, right? Those movies were made for nothing, right? And you hardly ever see anything, right? But the sound really gets you, okay? And so The Conjuring, I wanted the visual to be strong, but I need the sound to be even stronger.
The film weaponizes small noises, a rasping old man's breath, a toy that winds itself, a nursery rhyme turning monstrous. The writing walks a fine line between case file procedure and myth. On one axis, it's about evidence, investigators, tape recorders, interviews, and the media circus that always nips at stories like this. Anita Gregory's skepticism isn't a straw man, it forces the film to wrestle with how hauntings mutate the moment a camera is present. The fake footage of Janet tossing objects hurts not just because it undermines the case, but because it isolates a child who's already exhausted. On the other axis, the film folds into a neat piece of supernatural mechanics. Bill Wilkins, the gravel-voiced pensioner, isn't the author of the haunting, but a pawn pinned in place by a larger, colder intelligence. The mythology grows, the nun, the crooked man, the notion that evil colonizes familiar symbols, but the rules stay consistent. Faith is expressed as much in action as it is in speeches.
It's very important in horror movies that you care about the characters. If you care about the characters, the scares will play so much stronger. That's very important to the way I construct my scares. Because if you believe in the characters, if you really like who they are, I can put them into whatever situation and you would care about them. In the first movie, Patrick's character, Ed, was very nervous and was very protective of Vera throughout. And what I love about the second one is now it's flipped. It is Vera who's very afraid and protective of what would happen to Ed in this one.
What keeps the film warm is the way it treats faith and care as the same motion. Ed's Elvis moment lands like oxygen. A busted record player, a cheap guitar, a room full of kids who forget to be afraid for a few minutes. This is the counter-ritual the film believes in. Lorraine Sark turns terror into choice. She sees a vision of Ed's death and decides that foreknowledge is meant to be used, not surrendered to.
You have to balance that negativity. There's a lot of darkness that you're portraying.
With the first Conjuring, and certainly with this one, we were very careful to build the characters into real characters so that the more time you spent with them, the more you knew who they were, the scarier it would be when they went through the things that they went through.
You care for these people that are on this journey, that are living this nightmare, and you're going to be in there and you're going to be rooting for them, and you're going to hope it all ends well.
The climax works not because Latin is shouted louder, but because Lorraine names the thing, calls it what it is, and reaches for the people she loves. The series has always argued that evil tries to pervert families. Here, love, stubborn, domestic, almost corny, wins on purpose. The performances carry that approach. Vera Farmiga plays Lorraine with a softness that reads as scar tissue. Every vision looks like it costs her something. Patrick Wilson gives Ed a sturdy decency and a goofy charm that never curdles. You believe it can fix a boiler, cradle a guitar, and improvise a right because taking care of people is his reflex. Madison Wolfe is excellent as Janet, calibrating fear, resistance, and disassociation so the possession never feels like a party trick. Frances O'Connor grounds the film as Peggy Hodgson, all frayed nerves and iron underneath. Simon McBurney's Maurice brings earnest curiosity and grief, and even Franca Potent's detached skepticism adds necessary friction. The film is stronger for entertaining doubt rather than swatting it away.
Working with James on this level has been really, really fun because he's so good at what he does. It gives you an opportunity to really make a film that feels elevated above just genre, which is what we tried to do in The Conjuring.
I think the love story aspect of The Warrens is something that's very important for me. The idea of, sneaking in a romantic story into this film was really cool. I guess I just kind of disguised it as a horror movie. to get that across. I just love working with Vera and Patrick. Those two are so much fun on set to work with. They're kind of like kids, when I call Kyle's and we just have fun, and it does help. That kind of like lighter atmosphere really does make a big difference.
A handful of CGI beats don't bite as hard as the practical terrors of the original, and the middle can feel baggy, but the trade-off is a sense of place, a sharper exploration of belief under scrutiny, and a finale that ties its themes together with a satisfying economy. The demon's bluff is power without name, the family's strength is love with memory. The Conjuring 2 confirms that these films work best when they're about people first and phenomena second. One staging, the franchise's humane spine, and a cast that plays the extraordinary as painfully ordinary combine it into a sequel that's below its predecessor, but miles above most modern hauntings.
With this one, this is a much different feel, and it's just really, really, really freaky.
Very good, got it.
James's imagination, it becomes this adult version of a kid's fairy tale nightmare.
It's rare to see directors like James, whether it's Hitchcock or Spielberg. I think he really understands genres, and he really understands what to do with the camera. Literally every shot is framed in a certain way that is going to be used in a very clever way.
It's got a feeling that Hitchcock had, knowing what the human spirit is in terms of being afraid of things. He uses shadow and darkness and surprises.
The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It pivots from haunted house claustrophobia to an occult procedural, part road movie, part true crime riff on the Arn Johnson case, where human intent, totems, an altar, and occultists becomes the engine of terror. With Michael Chavez stepping in for James Wan, we get fewer slow, suffocating glide shots and more kinetic cross-cutting through morgues, tunnels, and courtrooms. The stakes also narrow and deepen around the Warrens themselves, Ed's mortality and Lorraine's visions. The film argues that naming evil matters, but smashing its instruments matters more.
I really wanted Conjuring 3 to get away from the haunted house setup of the first two Conjuring films. It should be more on a whole different level, something that we've never explored before in the Conjuring world.
We wanted to keep our new story grounded in the feel of Conjuring movies, but we wanted to make sure we were telling a brand new story. And we think the Arn Johnson story was something that really deserved a much closer look.
The film opens not with a mystery to be unraveled, but a crisis already in motion. On July 18th, 1981, Ed and Lorraine Warren arrive at the Glatzel home in Brookfield, Connecticut, to find a war zone, a chandelier smashed to glittering shards, gouges raked across the walls, and an 8-year-old boy, David, folding under something far stronger than fear. His parents, Carl and Judy, hover between panic and helplessness. His sister Debbie and her boyfriend Arn Johnson try to be steady when nothing in the room is. The film immediately trades gothic slow burn for kinetic tactile horror, an exorcism staged in tight spaces where every surface looks like it remembers being struck. Father Gordon arrives just as the family tries to catch its breath, and for a moment the house seems to hold still. Then the quiet fractures into a controlled detonation, a pounding in David's room, a bloody possession, followed by David stepping from the shadows with a knife that finds his father's leg. Ed clamps onto the boy, Lorraine and Father Gordon begin the rite, and the entity answers with escalation. Lights rupture, furniture buckles, David's small frame contorts into impossible angles. Lorraine's sight here floods with quick, jagged images that feel less like visions and more like fingerprints of a mind behind this haunting, ritual symbols, and a perverse altar. The attack escalates with a possessed David promising to stop Ed's heart. In the chaos, Arn does the one thing the Warrens' lectures always warn against. He bargains. Cradling David, he pleads with the demon to take him instead. Ed catches the moment and then collapses, the world narrowing to ambulance lights and hospital corridors. But David, limping calm, appears, quote-unquote, healed. In the hospital, Lorraine sits vigil with Drew and Judy before speaking with Father Gordon, and in a soft flashback, remembering how she and Ed began. A gazebo, a first kiss, the beginnings of a partnership that has weathered plenty of nights like this one. It's a great note the movie will return to. Love here is not decoration, but counterweight.
I could go back to the house, Father, but my home is here with him.
Back in Brookfield, Arn wakes with a plan that sounds like hope. Leave town with Debbie, start small somewhere quiet, outrun whatever they stirred up. The house suggests otherwise. Alone in the kitchen, he mistakes a skittering cereal box for something supernatural. Just a rat, he tells himself, until he notices the rock carved into the wall and an apparition blooming from the dark. a gaunt, predatory woman who grips his face with a snarl. The camera locks us into Arne's point of view so that we, like him, can no longer trust what the frame is offering. This is the film's pivot from haunting to hex, the sense that someone is not just inhabiting a body, but directing a campaign. At Brookfield boarding kennels where Arne and Debbie work, the pressure follows. Another vision ambushes Arne, and the spillover of fear gets him sent home early. He returns to Debbie and their landlord, Bruno Souls, a man who will shortly be a victim. In a parallel beat, Ed wakes in the hospital with Lorraine and their daughter Judy at his side. He forces the words out as soon as he can shape them. The demon didn't leave, it moved into Arne. Lorraine runs for a phone and calls them, but Bruno has the stereo cranked too loud to hear it ring. From here, the film strands Arne inside a weaponized unreality. He sees Bruno grabbing Debbie with drunken aggression. He sees Debbie fleeing, and then he sees Bruno again, but not as a man, something hulking and bestial in his place, and is forced to stab him repeatedly.
Arnie, help me!
The staging is crucial here. Music blares, lights pulse, and the world edits itself so quickly that even Arne can't separate provocation from hallucination. When the noise finally dies, he's on the road, soaked in blood and eyes wide, blinking at the blue and red wash of a patrol car's lights. He tells the officer he may have hurt somebody. As an opening, The Conjuring 3 lays out the case with a different structure than the first two films. The early exorcism breaks the usual rhythm by front-loading the transfer of possession, and the hospital interlude reframes the Warrens' role. Ed's body is now part of the stakes, and Lorraine's visions aren't just warnings, they're breadcrumb trails toward an author behind the phenomena. The aftermath of Bruno's murder pushes The Devil Made Me Do It from haunting into courtroom stakes. Police report that Arne stabbed Bruno 22 times, a number that will echo later, and the case seems open and shut until the Warrens step in.
So what does this mean then? I'm just crazy?
During his interrogation, Debbie insists Arne could not have done this of his own will, while Ed tries to provoke the demon, only to find he's no longer possessed. Still believing that he was likely controlled during the murder, they take that conviction to Arne's lawyer, arguing for a radically different defense, not insanity, but demonic coercion.
But I am not going before a grand jury and saying he was possessed by demons.
It's a legal gambit as much as a moral claim. If the court accepts external possession, the death penalty is off the table. Luckily, the judge allows the plea to be entered and Arne is remanded to a psychiatric ward while the system tries to square the supernatural with statute. To justify that plea, the Warrens return to the beginning. They comb through their recordings from David Glatzel's earlier possession and reconstruct the timeline from family testimony. 5 months before the exorcism, on move-in day, 8-year-old David had discovered a novelty waterbed and bounced on it until something pushed back. The mattress bulged, split, and a hand seemed to reach through the vinyl to grab him. At first, the family read off the aftermath. Stained floorboards, a rug covering soft rot as water damage. When the Warrens revisit the room with Debbie, those details read differently. Lorraine crawls into the tight space beneath the room and finds what the water couldn't have made, a carved witch's totem planted like a landmine. A haunted house mechanic gives way to a more deliberate architecture. Someone placed this to call something up. Ed and Lorraine conclude that they're not dealing with a free-floating demon, but with the work of a cult or a dedicated practitioner, and loop in their tech-savvy associate Drew to widen the search.
Are you saying someone did this to us on purpose?
Father Gordon points them toward a man who understands this world from the inside. Father Kastner, a former priest who dismantled a cult called the Disciples of the Ram.
We tried to understand why they did what they did.
In a home that feels more like an archive than a residence, Kastner recognizes the totem immediately as a Satanist tool, a focus for a curse rather than a random artifact. He leads them into a basement, packed with the detritus of his old adversaries, ritual objects in case files, and paints a grim picture of collateral damage. Even those who prosecuted the cult, he says, paid a price. A district attorney's infant born with catastrophic defects, a wife lost months later. The implication is clear. Once a curse is in motion, the harm radiates beyond its intended targets.
Is saving him worth everything you have? Because that's what it may very well cost.
While the Warrens pursue authorship, Arne lives with the consequence. In the psych ward, pushing a mop under humming lights, the walls of reality flex. A nearby patient turns, eyes empty, and croons "Call Me," the song that played the day Bruno died, before another figure grabs him. The sequence isn't a jump scare so much as a proposition. Whatever attached itself to one knows how to weaponize memory. A break in the pattern comes from Drew. He calls with the lead out of Danvers, Massachusetts, and puts the Warrens in front of Sergeant Clay. Two teenage best friends, Jessica Strong and Katie Lincoln, vanished from a sleepover. Later, Katie was found stabbed 22 times, the same count as Bruno, while Jessica remains missing. Investigators also recovered a totem at the scene identical to the one under the Glatzel house.
So, you're the experts. What can you tell me about this?
Clay is understandably protective of his file and skeptical of out-of-state demonologists, but Lorraine offers the only currency that will spend in a squad room: results. In front of a cluster of officers, she reads the case with her second sight, details she couldn't know otherwise, until even a hardened cop has to concede they might be seeing the same hand at work in Connecticut and Massachusetts.
It was a 1 in 3 chance. Afraid she won't be able to do it?
No, I'm afraid that she will.
The film has reframed its mystery. Arne's fate hinges on whether the Warrens can prove a human intelligence set the supernatural in motion. The repeated 22 stab wounds tie two crimes together. The totems turn accidents into engineering, while Kastner's archive suggests a lineage of belief behind the brutality. It's no longer enough to cast out a demon. Someone invited it, guided it, and won't stop until the chain is broken at its source. Debbie and David visit Arne in the psychiatric ward, and what Arne struggles to describe: waves of pressure, sudden drops into terror, the sense of being watched from inside, David recognizes immediately. It's the same texture of malice that had wrapped around him months earlier.
That's why you can't sleep, because it's never quite in your head.
That recognition reframes everything. Arne isn't just traumatized, he's still inside a system someone else built. Sergeant Clay takes the Warrens to the patch of woods where the two Danvers girls vanished. Lorraine's touch turns the ground into a projector. She slips into the moment when Jessica, already under an influence, turns on her best friend Katie and stabs her again and again. The connection is so complete that Lorraine's body starts to mimic the motion, and Ed has to physically pull her back before she hurts herself. She then follows the vision to the cliff's edge and sees how the night ends. Jessica, fleeing the horror of what she's done and the force driving her, goes over. A burst of something inhuman claws at Lorraine's ankle and tries to drag her down too, but Ed catches her. When the recovery team drags the river below, they find what Lorraine already knew would be there: the body of the missing Jessica.
Let me know where you're staying, and I'll get that case filed to you in the morning.
The case stops being academic when the phone rings. Debbie tells her the thing controlling Arne is now trying to push him into ending his own life, and so Ed orders her to get the staff to place him on watch, but the call fractures into an awful metallic screech, another reminder that the enemy can put its fingers on any wire.
Watch.
In the ward, a sympathetic priest passes on a small vial of holy water. As the world begins to warp around him, voices bending, edges twitching, he does the simplest old-world thing he can do: pulls a circle and stands inside it. To get ahead of the curse, the Warrens do something risky and illegal. They slip into the funeral home to reach Jessica's body. Lorraine takes the dead girl's hand and uses the contact to ride the current back to its source. The vision drops her into a lightless basement dressed for a ritual. Candles, a book of spells, the architecture of intent, and the woman Arne glimpsed in his kitchen, the occultist.
God has shown you to me, and your God has damned you.
Across that psychic bridge, Lorraine sees the woman pushing Arne toward shattering the vial and pressing his wrist to the glass, and so Lorraine shoves back as orderlies crash through Arne's door in time to stop him. But the bridge is now two-way. The occultist turns, looks straight into Lorraine's awareness, and answers with a weapon. A huge corpse in the funeral home jerks to life and lumbers toward her. Luckily, Ed tears Lorraine's hand from Jessica and the connection breaks. The body collapses. The victory tastes sour.
She knows who we are.
The hunt has become a duel. They regroup with the others and lay the pattern out. The totems are the delivery system. Plant one in a home or among the victims and the curse has a foothold. It forces a murder. Jessica on Katie, Arne on Bruno, then drives the killer to end their own life. That's the engine. To stop it, you can't only shield the targets, you have to smash the engine itself. The altar the occultist uses to focus and feed the work.
Once started, the curse must be completed. Her soul depends on it.
There's another complication. This isn't a hobby. The practitioner must finish the ritual to preserve her own soul as she promised one to a demon. Unfortunately, as they talk, Ed's heart begins to falter and he blacks out, but when he surfaces, the room is wrong. The occultist has projected herself into his mind space and threatens him plainly.
You know, the two of you have gathered quite the collection.
The next moment, the fat man corpse is back, charging at him, and Ed lunges with a knife to meet it, and almost strikes Lorraine. It isn't a revenant, it's an illusion draped over the person he loves. That nearly fatal feint tells him the occultist has laid a channel into their home, just as she did in Brookfield and Danvers. When they sweep the home, they find it. A totem stuffed inside a vase of rotten flowers, a wormhole masquerading as condolence. For all the distances involved, the rule has been the same in every place. Put the object near the target and the curse can reach them. To save Arn and themselves, the Warrens don't just need to banish a demon. They have to find the altar where a human being keeps lighting the candles and put them out. The investigation narrows from a web of incidents to a single architect. Ed and Drew trace the cursed totems back to a giveaway box from Fairfield University, which Jessica attended, suggesting the occultist isn't roaming randomly, she lives inside that orbit.
The river. Oh, dear God.
While they follow the trail, Lorraine returns to Father Castner for guidance and instead finds a confession. In the shadowed archive beneath his home, he admits he once had a secret daughter named Isla. In trying to shield her from the occult, he exposed her to it. Curiosity then hardened into devotion.
It's the only thing that can break her curse. We need to destroy it.
Footsteps overhead cut the conversation short and Kastner points Lorraine to a tunnel running beneath the house, exactly the sort of hidden place where an altar would live. As Lorraine descends toward the tunnel, Isla glides the other way and cuts her father's throat.
I failed as a father. Don't let me fail.
As this endgame begins, the film crosscuts between three fronts. In the psych ward, Father Newman sits with Debbie at Arn's bedside and feels the pressure in the room turn electric, the same unseen will that has been moving pieces from the start. In the tunnel, Lorraine finds the altar itself. Black candles, ritual marks, the focus point that powered every totem in possession, but she's unable to destroy it. And on the road, Ed races to reach her. Unfortunately, Isla finds him first. She blows a handful of powdered sacrament into his face and turns his body into a weapon, rage flooding the eyes we've been trusting for 3 films. Sledgehammer in hand, Ed stalks the tunnel, swinging at the person he loves. At the same instant, the curse peaks in Arn and he levitates from the bed. A shard of glass from the shattered windows glints in his hand as it turns toward his throat. What breaks the loop is not any new law, but the oldest argument in the series. Lorraine meets Ed's possessed gaze and speaks the one truth Isla cannot counterfeit. Love is not their weakness, it is their strength. Memory of a gazebo, a first kiss, a life built on staying cuts through the haze, and Ed's grip loosens as he pivots, bringing the sledge down and smashing the altar to rubble instead. The curse snaps, Arn drops, the air clears, and the tether is severed at its source. Isla steps forward to finish the job with her own hands, but her timetable is over. Without a completed ritual, her pact comes due. The entity she served arrives for payment, contorting her body in a grim reversal of the power she borrowed and carries her to hell. The aftermath restores the series' ritual of accounting. Ed places the altar's chalice in the Warrens' artifact room, another instrument of harm neutralized and shelved beside familiar relics, a private museum of cauterized wounds. Then they sit in the courtroom with Debbie as Arn faces the consequence the court will accept. A closing note explains Arn Johnson was convicted of manslaughter instead of murder, served 5 years, married Debbie while incarcerated, and that they remained together. One last grace note ties the film's proposition to its image. Ed leads Lorraine to a new gazebo he built in their yard, a deliberate echo of the one where they began. It's small, almost plain, and that's the point. The Devil Made Me Do It pushes beyond haunted houses into human malice and legal systems, but it ends where the franchise keeps ending, with a choice to keep loving in the ordinary daylight after the night has done its worst.
The trial of Arnie Cheyenne Johnson. This was an internationally renowned case, which was the first time in the history of law in the United States that...
That demonic possession was used as a reason for committing manslaughter.
The third Conjuring film draws from the 1981 Devil Made Me Do It case in Brookfield, Connecticut, when 19-year-old Arne Cheyenne Johnson killed his landlord, Alan Bono, and became the first US defendant to attempt a murder defense based on demonic possession. The homicide, Brookfield's first at the time, followed months of alleged disturbances surrounding Johnson's fiancée's younger brother David Glatzel, and it quickly drew national attention. According to family accounts and the Warrens, the trouble began with David, whose behavior led the Glatzels to seek help from clergy and from Ed and Lorraine Warren. Contemporary reporting and later retrospectives describe several minor rites but no church-approved major exorcism. The Diocese of Bridgeport has been cited as declining a formal rite while sympathetic priests conducted lesser services. Within this swirl of claims, Johnson reportedly challenged the entity to take him instead, a moment that later became central to the narrative around the killing. When the case reached court, Judge Robert J. Callahan ruled that demonic possession was not a legally admissible defense, barring related evidence and forcing the trial back onto conventional grounds. Johnson was ultimately convicted of first-degree manslaughter and received a sentence of 10 to 20 years. He served about 5 and was paroled in 1986, having married Debbie while incarcerated. Controversy has shadowed the story ever since. In later years, members of the Glatzel family publicly disputed the possession narrative and criticized the Warrens' account, arguing the events were exaggerated or misrepresented for media and publishing. That dispute, alongside the court's rejection of supernatural claims, explains why the case sits at the intersection of belief, folklore, and true crime, rather than in the annals of legal precedent.
If the judge had let us bring in our evidence, which were recordings, photographs, eyewitness accounts, and the priests were waiting outside of the courthouse in Danbury, Connecticut, to go into that courthouse and testify that what occurred to this young boy and Arnie Johnson was indeed diabolical possession. But I could understand the judge's feelings too.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't want to be known as the judge who allowed the devil made me do it case into his courtroom.
So the film's backbone is real: a 1981 killing, a failed attempt to introduce demonic possession in court, a manslaughter conviction, and lingering debate over what actually happened in the Glatzel home. Where the movie departs is in its dramatization, compressing personalities, inventing connective tissue, and amplifying the Warrens' role to shape a tidy supernatural thriller from a messy, much-contested case file.
I'm here to tell our story. There's not one day in my life that goes by that I never think about it. It's always there. He was possessed.
The Conjuring: The Devil Made Me Do It is the most ambitious and least precise of the original trilogy, a film that trades the first 2 entries' haunted house claustrophobia for an occult procedural spread across towns, morgues, tunnels, and courtrooms. It's also, in my opinion, the weakest of the 3. The most obvious change is behind the camera. With James Wan producing and Michael Chavez directing, the style and structure changes. Where the first 2 films mapped a house with patient, readable camera moves and then weaponizes that geography, this one keeps moving. The camera spends more time outdoors, in daylight or in transit. There's less of the slow, suffocating staging that made The Conjuring and The Conjuring 2 so effective. The trade-off is momentum. The narrative rarely stalls, but it also rarely lingers long enough to turn into real dread. As usual, production craft is solid across the board, even if a few beats flirt with uncanny CG. 1981 feels like 1981 through hair, wallpaper, and the hum of analog machines. Sound remains a quiet assassin, and the score leans into scraping strings and choral unease, deployed sparingly enough that the film still allows silence to do the scaring.
What's the point of a sequel if you can't outshine and outstory and out-heart the previous films?
Where the film wobbles is the writing. The premise is terrific on paper. Staged the Arne Johnson case is both a possession story and a legal gambit. The first act sets this up well, an exorcism that transfers the entity to Arne, a murder that looks to the law open and shut, the Warrens pushing an unthinkable defense to spare a death sentence. After that, the courtroom hook largely recedes. Instead of weaving hearings and skepticism through the investigation, the film collapses the legal strand into title cards at the end. What remains is an occult mystery driven by planted totems, a subterranean altar, and an occultist orchestrating murders. The mythology is clear enough moment to moment, but it never develops the satisfying clockwork of the first 2 films' rules, permission, names, stages of demonic activity. The antagonist is part of that unevenness, making human malice the engine. Someone placing objects, focusing intent could have sharpened the series' moral edge, but the occultist remains more function than character. She's an effective silhouette and a credible threat, yet she never accrues a psychology beyond must finish the ritual, and a connection to her father is sketched rather than dramatized. By contrast, the first two films ground their entities in history and then braid that history into the family's present. Here, the braid is thinner. Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga remain the anchor, playing a marriage defined by steadiness, humor, and a willingness to carry the cost of what they do. The supporting casts are decent and the lanes they're given. Ruari O'Connor makes unsympathetic and brittle, a young man blanked by forces he doesn't understand, and Sarah Catherine Hook gives Debbie a grounded courage that turns girlfriend into caretaker and moral center. John Noble brings weary, guilt-soaked gravitas to Father Kastner, while Eugenie Bondurant's gaunt, predatory occultist radiates human-made menace, chilling in presence even if thinly sketched. The Conjuring 3 falls short of the franchise's high watermark because its reach exceeds its grasp. The courtroom hook is underused, the villain underwritten, and some CG-assisted scares lack the bite of the earlier film's practical nightmares. At its best, it reminds you why the series endures. Even when the world gets bigger and the rules get messier, Ed and Lorraine keep choosing each other, keep choosing kindness, and keep walking into houses the rest of us would flee.
When I was working with Michael Chaves on La Llorona, I saw a filmmaker that really gets these kind of films. It's bittersweet for me to pass the baton on.
And action!
But it's good to get a fresh take on where we can take the Conjuring universe.
Well, that's all for today, folks. Thanks to all of you guys who requested we take a look at the Conjuring series. And if you'd like to make another suggestion, please don't hesitate to ask. As always, it's been a pleasure. Niyat here with Film Comics Explained. Thanks for stopping by.
We're offering something very special with these films, and I think that's one of the reasons people keep coming back. The final reason, of course, is that people love to be scared. I don't know that anybody has crafted or created better scare sequences than James Wan, David Sandberg, Gary Dauberman, Corin Hardy, John Leonetti, Michael Chaves.
Guys, we're making Conjuring 3. It's gonna be awesome.
These are all people that really know what they're doing, and they do an incredible job crafting new and original scare sequences. That's really what people come back to see.